It surprises me to say this next statement. The Young and the Restless is at 5th place in my rankings for April 2022. Just last fall when I started this, Young and the Restless started at the bottom. And it deserved it because in 2021, it was the most boring soap opera. But here we are in April, and it is up to being in 5th place in my rankings. Would I use the word good to describe The Young and the Restless? I don't know if I would go quite that far. But it continues to improve, and I have to give it credit for that. I was surprised that I put Young and the Restless quite this high, but when I got down to the top 7, basically, because 8 through 11 was easy. They are the worst for soap operas. But putting Y&R ahead of Shortland Street and Hollyoaks was surprising to me, but when I really thought about it, I had to do it because I have actually looked forward to watching Young and the Restless at certain points this month of April, and I couldn't really say the same for Hollyoaks and Shortland Street because they were kind of unwatchable at certain points. Maybe unwatchable isn't the right word, but they were not like engrossing. And Young and the Restless' storylines are far from perfect, and we're going to talk about it and how they basically only have 2 storylines. And I already mentioned this a few weeks ago on one of the soap opera diagnoses, that both of these stories are very similar, in my opinion, as well. So basically the 2 stories are the Newman family and the Abba family. For the Newman family, it's of course Ashland, who we had to go for months to wonder if Ashland was really lying about his health condition and if he's been plotting this whole time, and he ended up doing so, which was a change for his character because I don't think that was the original plan for his character. But I think somehow the show realized, hey, we kind of need some villains to make this fucking boring ass show interesting. And then the other storyline now is the return of Diane, who why I find this storyline kind of similar is because it has started being like, is Diane good, is Diane bad, which was the same questions asking about Ashland. Like, is Diane changed or is she still bad? I mean, the show's trying to make her seem like a Sheila-like villain. At least that's what the promos and some of the discussion online with the show, which is a bit absurd. But she is a good enough villain to return to this point, and I'm enjoying that story more than the Ashland storyline, but I still think both have their pros with the stories. Now, with the Ashland story, Adam is the one, of course, who is able to make a deal with Ashland to get him to step down from Newman Lock and leave town. He will pay him. You know, Victor was upset with Adam for trying to get this deal, but in the end, Adam can make his father proud and get Ashland to leave, even though Ashland ended up not leaving, but he did step down from Newman Lock. But Ashland seems to have really fallen for Victoria throughout all of this, and they're still trying to continue that love story. And Robert Newman I've talked about this since he started, because him coming into the show is when the show started to turn around, in my opinion. He brought an energy to the show that was highly needed. He's been doing some great acting since he came back. He has chemistry, and I think he's pushing other actors and actresses on the show to up their game because they kind of all got complacent in the boring Young and the Restless world. Now, we get this other side of the story where there's a 3-way car accident. Ashland, Victoria, and Ray are all involved in a car accident, and Ray ends up dying. Ashland has to save Victoria from her car after it starts on fire. And so that kind of gave them a bit of a spark, even though Victoria still doesn't want to be with him as of right now, even though Ashland is trying hard to win her back. But the show needs to keep Ashland as a villain, because just going back to Ashland being even a gray character who leans good isn't going to work. The show could use all the drama it can get, and I don't like the fact that they made it so that Ray just had a heart attack before the crash, and that's what caused the crash. I think they could have got way more drama out of Victoria or Ashland being responsible for the crash, but typical of this show over the past several years, you take out as much drama as you can instead of actually putting drama on the show. This is why I still think, despite the improvement, Josh Griffith needs to be fired still. I don't think he is the one that, called for changes on the show, because clearly there's been a change on the show these past few months. I think it was a higher up at CBS, because there was a lot of complaining about The Young and the Restless, and they either forced Josh Griffith to step up his game and actually write storylines, or somebody else might be, directing Josh into what to do to make the show better, because this change kind of came out of nowhere. And I don't think Josh Griffith is completely the one who did it. And I don't think Josh Griffith deserves to keep his job just because he's actually writing 2 storylines finally. He's been a writer this whole time, and your job as a writer is to write storylines. So we can't give him credit just for finally writing storylines. But let's talk about the Diane story. This is a story that tells me that something changed at Young and the Restless, and I don't know exactly what. Because they're actually taking the time to hit every beat of this story that they possibly can. Now, the reasoning for her faking her death was a little contrived. And, she just faked it because everyone hated her. And she was involved with powerful people or whatever. But I kind of do like that they tied Deacon into it for whatever reason. I don't know if he will play into Young and the Restless at all, him being at Bold and the Beautiful at this point. I do feel like, of all the characters that have crossed over between both shows, Deacon's has kind of been the most seamless. Sheila's been such a cartoon up and down for a while that it's no longer her. I actually think Deacon may have been the more entertaining crossover between both shows. And right now he has a good story. Well, good, because Bradley Bell can't write is probably not the right word for that either. But it is a... Deacon's story fits the character of Deacon on Bold and the Beautiful right now. But seeing him crossing back over to Young and the Restless, I wouldn't hate it. Even if it's like a short thing. And I loved Nikki's reaction when she found out that Deacon was involved with this. So yeah, but they're hitting all the beats of this story, the Phyllis-Diane rivalry. I don't know how I feel. I don't know if I've ever really said this, but the character of Phyllis is one of my least favorite characters in all of soap operas. So I really don't like the Phyllis character at all, or the actress that plays her. But they're hitting the beats of the story with people slowly finding out about Diane's death. It started with Jack and Phyllis, and then Jack told more of the Abbotts, and then Jack told Nikki, who confronted Diane and gave us some actual dramatic scenes on Young and the Restless, which was surprising. And then finally telling Kyle that his mother is alive. They're just hitting some of the right beats, especially the Nikki part of the story, because Nikki was the one that took the fall for Diane's supposed death in the first place. So, yeah. This story has been pretty decent so far, certainly with Josh Griffith's and Young and the Restless's current state. That they actually have a story that they're trying to tell beats of is surprising to me. But I'm glad that they're doing it, because Young and the Restless has been very watchable in April. I've looked forward to it at certain parts in April, and it surprises me just as much as it might surprise some of you. Now, I do still have my problems, and I don't know if Young and the Restless will stay this high. I don't like how there's only 2 stories, basically. And I also don't like how the people not involved in the main stories are the minority characters and the LGBTQ characters that are kind of just used as fodder for this show. And, they have all this representation, but it's basically lip service. And I don't like that at all. And CBS loves doing this shit. They've done it with their reality shows, and they do it with their soap operas. They're like, hey, we have all of these diverse characters, but we're not going to write for them. So it's basically just like for appearance's sake, and not actually for what would be an improvement, which is actually writing the minority characters and the LGBTQ representation into compelling storylines. So until the Young and the Restless can manage to do that, I'm holding that against them, because I don't like how these are all the characters on the back burner, and they killed off Ray, the only Latino character left on the show. Like, Ray was pretty damn boring, but to just kill him off and, like, nobody really cares other than Saren shows that this show just uses minority characters for appearance sake and for lip service to say, hey, look at the characters we have on the show. Yeah, they're not in the main stories, but here they are. So I'm holding that against the show, and I don't expect Young and the Restless to get higher than 5th place anytime soon. Although some of these other stories, soap operas at the top, are not doing so hot either, other than the top 2. But one of those top 2 is about to end this year. So Young and the Restless has potential to stay high in my rankings because I am enjoying it for the most part. But there's still a ton to improve upon. And I still don't think Josh Griffith deserves to keep his job just because he's actually finally writing a storyline.